the U.S. needs this deal more than the Chinese do. And remember that Xi Jinping is not subject quite the same politics that Trump is. They don't have elections, and they do a pretty good job of suppressing their population or suppressing dissent in their population. We don't do that, despite Trump's occasional best efforts. He needs to worry about the Congress. He needs to worry about the congressional election next year. He's got a lot of pressure on him to deliver. In our case, the tariffs he's imposed are going to hit early and often. And if he doesn't have anything to show for it, I think he's going to have a political problem here.
Let's talk about China now, because remember when Trump said all these countries want coming over, they want to do deals, they want to kiss my ass. You know, there's 200 countries want to do deals. Well, China is saying it's actually the US who want to begin negotiations with us over those 145% tariffs. That's what a social media account affiliated with the Chinese state media has announced. The post is on Weibo, and it said there'll be no harm in holding trade talks with the Trump administration, potentially indicating a softening in Beijing's approach to the situation. Remember, they said they would go to the ends of the earth. You know, we'll outlast you. Well, let's talk about this with William Reinsch, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It's a think tank, and former head of the US National Foreign Trade Council. William, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Oh, indeed. Okay, so what about this? That Trump was saying, you know, China wants a deal. He said, it would appear falsely last week, that Xi or the Chinese had called him and he'd spoken to Xi, and then that went into the ether. What about the Chinese being confident enough to say today they are approaching us?
Well, you know, nothing happens between them without a lot of drama. And that's what we're seeing right now. You have to think of it like a sumo wrestling match. You got these two giant 400-pound guys in the ring, stomping their feet, glaring at each other, throwing rice around, doing a belly bump or two. Eventually, they get to the table and talk. And that process is sort of beginning because they're beginning. I mean, the whole game has been, you know, who calls whom, you know, who goes first. Because they each believe that if you go first, you're giving up some leverage. So nobody wants to go first. So you construct a scenario in which, you know, they each say the other guy called them and announce there's going to be a negotiation. So they'll get there. It's just, I mean, it's kind of fun to watch, a lot of posturing and a lot of drama, and then they sit down and talk.
Yep, I see that the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett, they've been talking. They said they're hopeful for progress in easing trade tensions, and Hassett has been saying there'd been loose discussions all over both governments. One wonders what those loose discussions might have been about, because we know that the Chinese has drawn up a list of products that it will exempt from its retaliatory 125% tariffs. But where do you think the low-hanging fruit is?
Well, probably on buying more stuff. I mean, I predict a replay of 2018 and 2019. The Trump will go in with big demands, which actually are good demands. Stop subsidizing, stop stealing our intellectual property, you know, run your economy like a normal American economy. I mean, normal Western economy. Those are good things that would be good for Chinese growth, but they're not going to do that. And they're going to come in with big demands. They're going to want us to eliminate our export controls on high technology. And we're not going to do that either. So you end up with a small deal. And the obvious thing, and you've seen a hint of this already, the U.S. is saying, well, we're going to go back and look at the phase one deal in 2018 and 2019 and figure out what they didn't do in that deal, what they didn't honor. So that's a hint. They're going back to, let's buy more stuff.
I'm just looking at some figures that came out yesterday from the Purchasing Managers Index, and it shows that factory activity in China has dropped. It's to a nearly 2-year low. Now, some people are saying President Trump's steep tariffs, the tariffs have hammered trade between the two countries. But who do you think is suffering more? Factories in the US or factories in China?
Well, both sides think it's the other one. I'm inclined to think that probably the U.S. needs this deal more than the Chinese do. Uh, and remember that Xi Jinping is not subject quite the same politics that Trump is. They don't have elections, and they do a pretty good job of suppressing their population or suppressing dissent in their population. We don't do that, despite Trump's occasional best efforts. He needs to worry about the Congress. He needs to worry about the congressional election next year. He's got a lot of pressure on him to deliver. In our case, the tariffs he's imposed are going to hit early and often. And if he doesn't have anything to show for it, I think he's going to have a political problem here. So I think he needs the agreement. If what the Chinese are doing to us will hurt our factories, and I think they'll hurt them to, this is what you were alluding to.
Yep.
I think they'll hurt them to a bigger extent than Trump thinks, because so many parts and components we get from China, and you can't just shift to somewhere else in a week. It takes time.
Yeah. And what about the threat from Michael O'Leary, the chief executive of Ryanair, to cancel contracts with Boeing because of the tariffs and the increased costs of the jet and look to source from China instead? And Ryanair may not be the only one who comes to this conclusion.
Well, I hadn't heard about that one. That's an interesting one.
Yep.
I've assumed that the Chinese have canceled their Boeing purchases,
Yep.
and that you could see that one coming because they want to pump up their own competitor. And I think that what that means is that, Airbus is going to have a problem just like Boeing is in a couple of years. If Western airlines start doing the same thing, then that's going to be a big problem for Boeing. Peter Navarro, who's the president's advisor on trade, I think has said earlier this week that we need to have Boeing's back, but he didn't say what that meant. So I'm not quite sure what they'll do about it if that starts to happen.
Sure, we'll see. William, thank you very much for joining us on Times Radio. That's William Reinsch, a senior fellow at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Henry Bonsu on Times Radio.